talking about bringing the grill up here.
Man, I done lost the place where I was, bro.
What's it? Is it Antar? Oh, no, for sure. That'll be oh, no, you good. You don't have to worry about it. We can find a place again, man.
Oh, okay.
You said but you was on the last chapter, not the last chapter, but you was back in the 200s, right, towards the end?
I think, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, because you said the 90s is what you was reading?
Yeah, and it mentioned Obama in that last piece I read.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, 1990s. It's all about the numbers, right?
Yeah.
That was the chapter. Okay, 1990s.
Yeah, the last thing it said, Obama had increased the funding to
really?
like 55 billion or something.
Obama, huh?
Yeah. Mr. Obama.
Damn.
What kind of pizza is that?
I think they said it's pepperoni.
Pepperoni.
Yeah, definitely gonna get you some. They spoke about Bill Clinton already?
Yeah, they mentioned Clinton. Yeah, they were
Bill.
talking about Clinton, Biden, and Obama at the same time.
Yeah.
But the last sentence was about Obama.
Really?
Yeah.
Where'd you stop? Where'd you stop at? You remember? 218.
218.
Okay.
So I read about five pages after
so
that.
223 cops early Monday morning. Chief of detectives. Oh yeah, right here during 2008 campaign, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, but especially Biden, credited the cops program.
Yeah, I think I stopped right here.
Right there, at that marker. Okay, bet. So what did you think about the pieces of this that you read?
I think that it shows how determined they were to increase policing in this country, and they were willing to do anything to make that happen, and not let us know that, you know, we got police here on the streets, but they were actually federally funded police officers. Yeah, we never knew that.
Right. As we've been going through reading these things, one of the things I've emphasized is how important it is for us to be reading these things and cross-reference them to issues that we're dealing with in Rockford, Illinois, and issues that we're dealing with in the present day. So when the things that you went through and read, did any of those things pop any cross-references or make you think of any type of issues that we're facing today or issues that may be prevalent today?
Yeah, definitely. He kept mentioning militarization. So yeah, this is exactly a point that he made that I was reading. They talked about Madison, Wisconsin investing in basically a tank. I live in the Jackson Oaks neighborhood here, just east of here. So one day I'm out with somebody that I know in this community, and we roll up on this tank that has surveillance in it, and they're actually surveilling the people coming up and down Crosby Street in this community with this big surveillance vehicle that looked really conspicuous, but you can tell that they were definitely on something. And we're here in this city, living here every day, doing what we do, and we're being surveillance in a way that, you know, that most people wouldn't even expect.
Right. One of the other things that we've has been a commonality between the books, and we've been trying to stress understanding the commonalities in the books, is a timeline in which they speak in. They speak about a certain type of societal issues that were taking place in the 50s and the 60s, which was really the civil rights era type of thing, and also some of the crimes that were going on then. But you can sort of see how each decade has its own narrative and its own societal demonization of certain groups and marginalization of certain groups, and sometimes new groups get added in, sometimes other groups rise up higher or lower. But the constant has been the group of black people in this country and in this in America. And so the question I want to ask you is, you have a wider spectrum of history than me because you're older than me and you've experienced more and seen more, been alive more. When I think back honestly, I'm going to go through the last 50 years. Maybe I'm going to go through like the last 60, 70 years by decade, but honestly this can be expounded out further. But when I think about the history of black people in America, I think of slavery and enslavement for a very giant portion of a time. And then I think about a small bit of time where they had Reconstruction, and when they tried to grasp at trying to get some equity and some type of equality and some type of freedoms and liberties, and they tried to right the ship of slavery. And from after Reconstruction, there is a giant turn where they become completely black people become completely disenfranchised again, and Jim Crow becomes separate but equal, becomes basically the law and the statute of the land. So you go from slavery to a small period of trying to upheaval, and then from that point you have Jim Crow, and then after Jim Crow comes in is the Civil Rights era. And even though the Civil Rights era is looked at and praised at as if it was something that was this monumental moment where all of these different things changed, and it was this monumental moment where things were just extremely positive, the honesty and the fact is that it was a lot of families that were destroyed because of the things that was happening in the Civil Rights movement. There was a lot of people who were martyred, and a lot of people who were killed, and a lot of people who were in prison. And so even though black people were struggling and to try to get something and attain something that was righteous and that was very positive, they dealt with a lot of negative effects. And so in the midst of that happening, so you have that portion of time, and then after that you have the Vietnam War coming in heavily and heroin coming in heavily, and the very beginning of the deindustrialization of black communities. So factories begin to be pulled out. Some of the Ford and GM and some of those things start to be less prominent in these neighborhoods where that was some of the closest things to equity some black people were starting to get to, or some type of fair chance at employment that black people were starting to get to. It wasn't something that was necessarily requiring a college education. It was a job you could learn on the job. That started to disappear around this time as we get through the 70s. And then after you get through that, you get to the 80s. And then when you get into the 80s, you get deep into the crack epidemic and how the crack epidemic deeply affected these neighborhoods. And then even further deindustrialization. And then you even more ghettoifying of neighborhoods. And as all of these things are happening to these black communities, you can see how the political nature changes and the societal nature changes and the criminalization nature changes. And you can see each one of these decades as each one of these things happen, it's a further criminalization of these communities and these people, and a deeper marginalization of these communities and these people. And then you finally do get to the 90s where, as people have spoke about a lot of time, Bill Clinton balloons this system of mass incarceration and balloons this system of policing, and it almost jumps the shark. And you see that all of these little small things were culminating into what would happen in the 90s, even to the extent that when we look back into the 90s, it wasn't a Republican president who did these things, or some type of segregationist president, or this president with this racist rhetoric. It was a Democratic president. It was a president that black people called the first black president at times. It was a president that black people was, just a handful of years ago was ready to elect the wife of the man. And of course, a wife is not to blame for her husband's shortcomings or faults. But Hillary Clinton was no just regular first lady. Hillary Clinton campaigned for Bill Clinton and endorsed heavily for Bill Clinton and spoke on behalf of Bill Clinton. She was famous for the super predator quote that was going around. Even when you think about it, black people just completely helped to get Joe Biden into office. And you can see how even in some of these books, they speak about Joe Biden planting these type of dog whistle seeds, and Joe Biden being along for the crime bill. And now Joe Biden is in the highest office of the land, and that is because of black people as well. And so I say all of these things and bring all of these things as we go through all of these decades, and we see all of the implications that all of these things have. Let me ask you this, and I don't mean to be leading in this question, especially since I brought so much to the table before I'm asking this question. But with all those things in understanding, with all of those things in retrospect, with all of those things being discussed, do you think that it is possible in this society, in this country, for black people to have to be liberated. And when I say liberated, I don't mean in any type of isolated incident. When I say isolated incident, I don't mean like, is it possible for one black person to bring his family up and not deal with certain issues? I don't mean, is it possible for one black city even, or one city even, to no longer have to deal with these things for their black community? But do you think that it is genuinely possible for black people to have a 10-year span in which, when they look back from this point to that point, they can genuinely say that things have gotten better, that they have became closer to liberation and closer to being free, as opposed to if you take a time stamp from 1950 to 1960, things are different, but they're not better. If you take a time span from 1960 to 1970, things are different, but they're not better. 1970 to 1980, things are different, but they're not better. 80 to 90, things are different, but they're not better. 90 to 2000, things are different, but they're not better. 2000 to 2010, things are different, but they're not better. And there was even a time where argument might have been made where from the election of President Barack Obama until maybe the beginning, to the election date of Donald Trump, when he became elected, where people might have told you that things have became better, where some of these things have been fulfilled and some of these dreams were real. But we can see now how every time that there has been any type of step where black people have taken a step forward, behind the corner it was 2 steps backwards coming. So what do you think that it is possible for us to have a period of 10 years where black people look back and they say that they have came further than they were before?
Probably not even in my lifetime, brother. I don't think so, because like you said, we take 2 steps forward and it's 10 steps back after that, because we still living under the heavy law of white supremacy that culminates, that's a part of every fabric of this country. And of course, when you have white supremacy, you have major amounts of anti-blackness, and it's still out there. No matter who we're putting in office, who's sitting in a seat next to the president or in a presidential seat, it lacks, especially when if these folks are not progressive enough to have a completely a Pan-Africanist vision for this country. When you don't have a Pan-Africanist vision for this country, or even I would say 10 cities that were completely Pan-Africanist in this country, that still wouldn't do it, because it's white supremacy is still the law of the land. It's still super hard for most of us to, if we wanted to get a loan from a bank.
Yep.
Neighborhoods are still redlined,
Yep.
or being there's still redlining going on. We're still being shot and killed by the police, and this whole block is an example of that, an instance of that. And until all of that is behind us, big time, this will never be ultimately free in this country. And I think about Assata Shakur, I think about El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, aka Malcolm X. I think about writers like Octavia Butler or Toni Morrison, who know in any instance, whether they're giving a speech or writing a book or writing a line for a book or something, they know ultimately we're not free, and especially when our minds and spirits aren't free, that we aren't free. And I don't see our minds and spirits being free here in the United States of America.
All right, we gonna get you back more times reading, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we gonna get you in some of these these group discussions too, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we got Chris Sims came down and participated in the Rockford reading. We're on day 6 of the ongoing teaching and Say Their Name Square. I just want to thank everybody who has came out and participated, whether that be through reading, whether that be through listening, whether that be through watching at home and sharing things at home, commenting at home. For the people who have came and helped with serving people on Saturday and Sunday, we want to thank you. We're only 6 days in. It's more. We got many more days on the other side. We're starting to get in a good groove of this thing here. We want to encourage people. Please come out and read. Please come out and listen. Please come out and participate in this dialogue. I'm gonna start going through and inboxing people, mass messages, asking people to come out and read, asking people to sign up for times to read. And again, before we got another reader here. I'm gonna let him hop in and knock some of these pages out and let y'all hear some of his thoughts. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that the reason that we are doing this is because it is power in these. It's power in these, and this may not be the most flashy or the most glamorous protest, or the most flashy or the most glamorous event or direct action, but it is those nonetheless. When people drive by here and they have to listen to us reading these books, and they see this picture of Denzel behind us, and they see multiple community members coming out, they understand that this is something that is not going away. This is something that has not this city has not went back to business as usual. When people come out to downtown and to the heart of this city, and they have to see these memorials here and these pictures here, it's a reminder that things have not went back to business as usual since May 30th in Rockford, Illinois. And like me and the brother Chris Sims just spoke about, it is that we have to anchor our realism, our hope and our positivity with realism. And because history says that there's not been a 10-year span in which black people have taken full steps forward in this country, we have to understand that means that we will have to continue to struggle. That as a people, we cannot all omit out of this country. That even if we did omit as black people out of this country, as long as this country continues to be set up in the manner in which it is, it would just be another set of people who ended up being the oppressed at the bottom of that caste system. And we would, and then what are we supposed to just disregard that someone else is being oppressed? As long as oppression is going on, it's important for us to struggle against that oppression, whether the oppression is being directly felt by us or whether it's being directly felt by our brothers and sisters. Because as Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So the day that your rights are being trampled upon, that day brings me a day closer to my rights being trampled upon. And so what we have to do is we have to understand our commonalities, we have to understand our differences, and we have to build on our commonalities and build on our differences. And these pieces of literature and these books right here are laying out the blueprint for us to do that. These are laying out the blueprint for us to be able to organize around communities. These are laying out the blueprints for us to be able to mobilize around communities. It is going to be people for years to come, for decades to come, who are going to watch these videos and listen to the rhetoric being espoused by the people reading. All right, okay, so we're going to get another reader in here. Again, we reading Rise of the Warrior Cop. This is day 6. Y'all go out, grab this book. We're going to get more. We're going to get multiple copies out here. We're going to be building this community library. We on Rise of the Warrior Cop, man. We're going to get a new reader in here. Chris Sims, man, he going to be back. He going to be back.
I'll be back. Thanks, sir.
All right, y'all. Sorry about the mic. Sorry about the mic. All right, big dog, it's on you. All right, Chris Sims.
All right, bro.
Yeah, you go ahead. You go ahead and slide out. We go ahead and take the main seat. Yep.
Peace and love, bro.
Yeah, peace and love, bro.
All right, what chapter we on here? Gotcha.
You right here.
Okay.
Light cool for you? Got enough light? Let them know.
Early Monday morning, one of the city's more well-known drug dealers has obtained a large shipment of rock cocaine. Mad Dog, who was credited by police with killing a number of rival dealers after giving them a Mad Dog look, he said he will never be taken alive. The intelligence indicates that Mad Dog has been obtained with enough rock cocaine to supply the city's drug users for a month. He reportedly held up in a fortified apartment on the 3rd floor of a public housing project surrounded by colleagues armed with military-type assault rifles. That was the scenario Joseph McNara set up to kick off. Hold on, baby. Hold on, let me get this book. Pull up a seat. That was the scenario Joseph McNara set up to kick off the afternoon panel he was moderating for a groundbreaking drug policy conference in 1997 at the Hoover Institution. McNara was a fellow at Hoover. The conservative think tank affiliated with Stratford University. More than 100 police chiefs, judges, prosecutors, civil rights and civil liberties leaders, drug treatment professionals, and academic had gathered for an event, which was covered by C-SPAN. It was likely the first event of its kind, and if not, it was certainly the most high profile. McNara, who had 35 years experience in law enforcement, himself had to become a critic of the drug war and police militarization. But Hoover's name gave the event some credibility in conservatives and law enforcement officials. Speakers included Milton Friedman, former Secretary of State George Shultz, Baltimore Mayor Kurt Schmoke, Baltimore Police Commissioner Thomas Frazier, Ed Meese, California Judge James Gray, and San Jose, California Mayor Susan Hammer. McNair himself started his career as a patrol officer in Harlem in 1960, where he walked one of the highest crime beats in the country. He worked his way up through the NYPD, achieving the rank of lieutenant before accepting the Criminal Justice Fellowship at Harvard. Under the fellowship, he studied the operations of a methadone clinic back in Harlem, which spurred his interest in drug policy. McNair went on to earn a doctorate in public administration. His dissertation was an examination of how law enforcement handled drug use in America before and after 1913, Harrison Narcotics Act. After completing his doctorate, he returned to the NYPD as a deputy inspector in charge of crime analysis. In 1973, McNair was appointed police chief in Kansas City. 3 years later, he was appointed police chief for San Jose, California. He headed that department for 15 years. McNair resisted the aggressive militaristic trends brought on by the drug war in the 1980s. He embraced community policing and showed little tolerance for police misconduct and excessive force. By the time he retired in 1991, San Jose surpassed San Francisco to become one of the most populous city in Northern California, among cities with population of 400,000 or more. San Jose also had the lowest crime rate in the country for at least 3 years of McNair's tenure. The city's crime rate in 1990 was 60% of San Diego's, half of that of San Francisco, and 1/4 of the rate in Los Angeles. McNamara pulled this off with one of the smallest capital police departments in America. That record and his own conservative politics won McNair clout with that right. Despite his vocal criticism of the war. All right, bro, love. Despite his vocal criticism of the war on drugs, police abuse, and police militarization, it also helped him land his post-law enforcement position with Hoover shortly after retirement in '95. Okay, it's McNamara. Got me a little choked up. McNamara. McNamara won funding to conduct four drug policy conferences at Hoover. The first in 1995. The panel he was moderating in 1997 was the second. McNamara's co-panelists for the militarization sessions were Los Angeles Police Chief Bernard Parks, U.S. District Judge Robert Sweet, San Jose Mayor Hammer, Defense Attorney Ron Rose, San Francisco District Attorney Terrence Hallinan, ACLU Executive Director Eric Glasser, former Santa Clara, California NAACP Director Tommy Fulcher, and Robert Garner of the Drug Abuse Services Bureau in Santa Clara. After laying out the hypothetical above, McNamara turned to Chief Parks. What was his next move? Parks responded that he'd attempt to verify the tip. If checked out, he'd send a SWAT team. McNamara asked about a sort of ammunition the SWAT team used. Weren't their bullets capable of going through walls? They'll go through a car engine 2 blocks away, Parks answered. McNamara then changed the hypothetical. What if it wasn't crack, but marijuana? Would he still send armed to the chief SWAT team? Parks said he would. What if it was a shipment of bootleg volume? Still with the SWAT team. Black market booze? SWAT team. Mayor Hammer was up next. What was her role of overseeing the police department? Would she be comfortable with her own police department conducting a heavy-handed SWAT? Hey, baby, have a seat, boo. Listen to this book. A heavy-handed SWAT raid in a crowded housing complex over illegal volume. Hammer replied that her job was to support the chief, not to question him. If the raid had gone over poorly with the public, she might go on TV to reassure the city. She added that she doubted whether such raids did anything at all to reduce the drug supply, but that the raid needed to be carried out anyway. I don't know how you don't do the raid and have any credibility with the community. McNamara then turned to Dot Hollian. He too said it wasn't his job to question the police tactics. Even if he thought the raid was too dangerous and unnecessary of force, he'd keep his opinions to himself. It just wasn't his job to tell the police chief whether or not he thought that the raid was appropriate. McNamara also asked Sweet, the federal judge, if he had signed a warrant to make the raid a no-knock. In each of the various hypotheticals, since Nixon first pushed the no-knock policy, politicians and police officials have started over and over again the tactic that would be monitored and patrolled by the judges who must sign off on the search warrants. Sweet said that while he worried about the drug war's erosion of the Fourth Amendment, he and most judges typically didn't second-guess or provide much scrutiny to affidavits requesting no-knock search warrants. After the fact, they might hear a defendant's argument that contraband seized in the raid should be suppressed because the raid was unreasonable. But this, in his experience, judges rarely gave any consideration to whether the use of the SWAT team and paramilitary volatile entry tactics were appropriate use of force for the crime under investigation. It went on like that. Even Glasser and Fulcher, the civil liberties activists, said that they had become involved only if they received complaints from the residents of the housing complex about police misconduct after the raid. They likely wouldn't devote any resources to criticizing the tactics themselves. Garner, the panelist who had an extensive public health background and who ran Santa Clara's public addiction clinic, added that police in his community had never in his career consulted him about the extent of the drug problem in Santa Clara. Be it about drugs were most prevalent, which drugs presented more of a public health threat than others, or what sorts of policies would best confiscate a supply of illegal drugs. It was a level of force that could well result death or injury to innocents, and indeed by that point had already had countless times. What's more, he added, that what drug he was pursuing and how much actual harm that particular drug had caused had no relevance on the amount of force he elected to use. Every public official on the panel who had the goes, and they never meet to discuss police drug raids unless something goes away. Each panelist indicated to a sensitivity to problems of drug control, appropriate police conduct, and public safety that felt that his or her role was basically compartmentalized. Another troubling theme to emerge from 1997 conference is that police, judges, and prosecutors, the people who voiced his displeasure with McNamara, invited media to cover the conference. He said the presence of reporters made him and other drug war critics reluctant to talk candidly. In response to a questionnaire about overall impressions of the conference, one police chief wrote, "The conference reinforced my feelings that we need to change." A prosecutor wrote that the event confirmed my views that the war on drugs cannot be justified logically or economically. Neither approaches are needed, and soon another police chief wrote, "The conference gave me a strong sense of the need for changing drug policies." And still another wrote, "It is risky for us to even attend the conference, which could lead to an accusation of being soft on drugs." A judge wrote that the conference challenged many of my views, but all of them requested anonymity. There's a strong argument that Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Madascrananu, I don't know what the hell that's a long name with a lot of, I'm just gonna say Mata. And Emil Mata did more to advance the militarization of America. Hey bro, can you pronounce this word right here?
Oh yeah, that's somebody's last name from a different language.
That shit.
Madascrananu.
Really good. Yeah, that's what I'm just gonna go with that. Emil Madascrananu did more to advance the militarization of American police forces than anyone short of Daryl Gates. Phillips and Madascrananu, a Roman immigrant, met at a gold gym in the late 80s, struck up a friendship, and embarked on a decade-long crime spree together. By the time they were preparing a heist of a Bank of America in North Hollywood, California, in early 1997, they had robbed 2 armored cars and 2 other branches of Bank of America. On the morning of February 28th, the 2 suited up in body armor and loaded a Chevrolet Celebrity with 6 guns and over 3,000 rounds of ammunition. The robbery went down with no casualties, though they were too disappointed to make out with only a little over 300,000, less than half of what they were expecting. But as they left the bank around 9:30 a.m., several LAPD patrol cars had already showed up and formed an embankment. The officers taking cover behind their squad cars, Phillips and Madascrananu fired off several rounds at the cars. The police fired back. The shootout was on. The officers hit 2 men several times, but the patrol officers' weapons, including 1 shotgun, couldn't penetrate the body armor. About 20 minutes later, the LAPD SWAT team showed up. At around 10 minutes before 10 a.m., Phillips' rifle jammed. He started firing with a pistol, then dropped that too after he was struck in the hand. He picked the pistol up, and about 20 minutes after the shootout began, he shot himself in the head. Madascrananu tried to mount an escape in the Celebrity, but police had shot out the tires. He managed to move it a few blocks, but where he attempted to commandeer a pickup truck, when he couldn't get it started, he took cover behind just as the SWAT team arrived. He exchanged fire with them for a few more minutes before surrendering. By then, he had been shot at least 20 times in the legs and other parts of his body unprotected by armor. He died before the ambulance arrived. By the end of the shootout, more than 300 law enforcement personnel fired approximately 650 rounds at each of the 2 men. Phillips and Madascrananu fired 1,100 rounds between them. The shootout lasted 44 minutes. 11 police officers and 7 citizens were wounded. Phillips and Madascrananu were the only fatalities. Nearly all of the shootout was a broadcast on live television by several local helicopters. If you wanted to create an incident to win sympathy for the police militarization, you could do much better than the North Hollywood shootout. A live televised shootout between hundreds of cops and two career criminals, heavily armed and armored, and who refused to go down, was a tailor-made poster case for soldiering up. America's police forces. The following September, the Pentagon sent 600 M16s to the Los Angeles Police Department for officers to put up in their patrol cars. The department also authorized patrol officers to carry .45 caliber semi-automatic pistols. The incident moved other police departments across the country to upgrade patrol officer sidearms as well. In the 15 years since it happened, North Hollywood shootout has become the go-to incident for proponents of the police militarization. For years now, it being regularly cited as a prime example of why cops need bigger guns and why police departments need SWAT teams. There's some merit to these arguments. A strong argument could be made, for example, for allowing patrol officers to store powerful weapons in the trunks of their squad cars in the event that they're the first on the scene of such an incident. What's going on, bro? But the incident isn't an argument for the proliferation. Huh? Oh, you can't hear me?
I'm just gonna make it less of a car.
Okay.
I'm just gonna turn it to you like that. You good?
Good looking out, bro. Given that only 2 fatalities at North Hollywood were the criminals themselves, and the incident happened 15 years ago, the incident stand power as an antidote in some ways puzzling, but in other ways perhaps it isn't. That the best antidote defenders of police militarization could come up with is 15 years old may attest to the rarity of such incidents. In any case, even most critics of the SWAT phenomenon acknowledge that there are some situations where a paramilitary police response is appropriate, and a heavily armed bank robbery would be right at the top of the list. Criticism of SWAT proliferation is that the overwhelming majority of SWAT deployments today are to break the private residence to serve search warrants for nonviolent crimes. Phillips and Mascherano committed armed robberies, crimes for which violence is prerequisite. The other major incident from the late 1990s that proponents of militarization often cite in justifying SWAT teams is the 1990 mass shooting of the Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. But if the justification for SWAT teams is to have a team of brave, highly trained, highly professional, well-armed and well-protected cops to intervene in such tragedies, Columbine is a particularly unfortunate example. Though there were eventually 800 police officers and 8 SWAT teams on the Columbine campus, the SWAT teams held off from going inside to stop the shooters. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris because they deemed the situation too dangerous. A spokesman for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department justified that SWAT teams' actions after the shooting. A dead police officer would not be able to help anyone. Wow. So what they saying is, even though it was shooters in the Columbine, they held off outside until the shit was over with. This is America. If we went in and tried to take them to get shot, why would we be a part of the problem? David Koppel said Independence Institute of Colorado explained how that panned out for the victims. While one murder after another was being perpetuated, a dozen police officers were stationed near the exit. These officers made no attempt to enter the building, walked 15 steps, and confront the murders. According to police speaking on condition of anonymity, one Denver SWAT officer did begin to enter, but immediately ordered down by commanders. They might as well not even showed the fuck up and just wait till everybody was dead and came to clean up. It's just a big contradiction. But 20 minutes after the rampage began, 3 SWAT officers were finally sent into the building on the first floor on the side of the building furthest from the library where killings were in progress. The library killings and went downstairs to the cafeteria. More students were hiding in a room nearby with the door locked. The 2 murderers attempted to shoot off the lock and entered the room. Where my baby at? Oh, she right there. She good. Students in the room had called 911 and the line was open, so again, the killer's location was known. Many officers were massed near the cafeteria door. They knew where the murderers were. They knew that the murderers were attempting to get into the room to kill more people, but the police stood idle. Harris and Clybo killed themselves in the library, not knowing that and still considering it is too dangerous to enter the portions of the building where there had been known gunfire. It took more than 3 hours for SWAT team and finally reached the victims. In the meantime, science teacher David Sanders bled to death on the floor. He might have survived had he received reasonably prompt medical attention. He was still alive when the police finally reached him. 3 hours after he had been shot, he died during the additional 45 minutes it took for paramedics to reach him. Students in the classroom had put up a sign in the window to alert the police to his condition. It reads, "I'm bleeding to death." The LAPD SWAT team was later asked to review the actions of their colleagues in Jefferson County. They found the officers had followed standard procedure. Perhaps that was just an act of professional courtesy. If not, consider the implications. Columbine was precisely the sort of incident for which the SWAT team had been invented. Excuse me. It was the sort of incident often cited by defenders of SWAT teams to justify their existence. And it was the sort of incident for which the critics of SWAT team concede to use of a SWAT team would be appropriate. Yet, not only did the SWAT teams at the scene not confront the killers, potentially costing innocent lives, but the most respected SWAT team in the country then reviewed the Jefferson County team's actions and found their actions were appropriate. But a lot of people died. In their following years, Littleton and North Hollywood would be cited as non-seen by police officials in towns and countries across the country, agitating for their own SWAT team or defending their arguing for more weaponry for the one that they already had. When the town of Ithaca, New York, reformulated its SWAT team in 2000. For example, Assistant Commander Peter Tyler was asked why a college town with virtually no violent crime needed a SWAT team in the first place. He pointed to Columbine and similar mass shootings. "I think it's naive for anyone to think that it couldn't happen here in Ithaca," he said. Perhaps, but in a different context. Ithaca Police Chief Richard Basil later explained that the reformulated SWAT team would save taxpayers money because it was a smaller size made it more efficient at its primary duty, serving drug warrants. A 2002 Miami Herald article on the spread of SWAT teams in Florida noted that police say they want SWAT teams in case of a hostage situation or a Columbine-type incident. But in practice, the teams are used mainly to serve search warrants on suspected drug dealers. Some of these searches yield as little as a few grams of cocaine or marijuana. As recently as July 2012, Portland, Maine Police Chief Michael Sawchuk cited both incidents to justify the department's acquisition of a military-grade armored truck. There have, of course, been a number of school shootings since Columbine on both high school and college campuses, and some, like Virginia Tech, have ended horrifically high body counts. But most such shootings are also over within seconds, far less time than it would take a typical SWAT team to scramble on the scene. One possible exception is Newton, where a Connecticut State Police SWAT team arrived quickly, and their presence reportedly persuaded shooter Adam Lanza to kill himself instead of killing more children. It is also important to note that they make huge headlines and spark weeks of breathless coverage. School shootings and mass shootings in general are exceedingly rare. University of Virginia psychologist and education professor Dewey Cornell, who studies violence prevention and school safety, has estimated that the typical school campus can expect to see a homicide about once every several thousand years. The hell? Hardly justification to rush out to get a SWAT team. Yet, many college campuses now have their own paramilitary police teams, and many cited Columbine and Virginia Tech as the reason they needed one. A recent example is the University of North Carolina Charlotte Campus Police Department, which stated a SWAT team in 2011. Lieutenant Josh Huffman explained why it's necessary. The purpose for creating the UNCC SWAT team is to protect the community and prevent the loss of life. We must be prepared to respond to high-risk situations such as those tragedies occurred at Virginia Tech and Columbine. The number of campuses hippie. The head of the Seattle Police Department during the 1999 World Trade Organization WTO protest was Norm Stamper, the same guy who pioneered the community policing and tried to